Before we get into this episode, I wanted to introduce one of the partners for the show, Move Pre-Workout. I've been using this over the last year and can massively see the benefit with all my training. And I thought I'd invite Tom along, who was involved in the formulation.
Cheers, Mark. Obviously delighted to be supporting the podcast. And so Move Pre-Workout, we've got a strength-based formula, but this one is specifically designed for endurance athletes. And it's one of the first of its kind. We're just focusing on really high-quality ingredients that are going to benefit endurance performance of any kind. So, yeah, we're really excited by the product and delighted to be supporting podcasts like yourself.
Oh, it's amazing. And this is something that you're specifically taking before your training, before your rides, to be in best possible shape. I'd encourage you to give it a try. Go to movepreworkout.com and for a 20% discount, put the word endurance in at checkout. On with the show. Welcome to the Endurance Podcast. We are still recording live at the Adventure Travel Show in Islington in London, and delighted on this episode to be joined by Amy Ennion. Before we bring Amy into the podcast, we are halfway through the second day. It's Sunday lunchtime as we record this. I'm sure you're listening and watching it well into the future. But just to give you a sense of what it's like to film at these live events, we do it in person because you get, frankly, a much better conversation. It's easier out on the epics. When we're out on location or at these shows, we're at Kendal Mountain Film Festival, here we are. And there's something about setting up the cameras and the light and the whole media setup just brings real intrigue. It really does create that excitement. We're sort of set up in a corner of the trade show here. There's thousands and thousands of people milling around us, loads of stuff going on to do with adventure, travel, cycling. So it's quite novel in this conversation to be bringing in an ultra endurance swimmer, because I'm sure we've got a ton to learn here, but here is a topic that we have not covered before. We've had a couple of people on this weekend who have climbed Everest, run silly distances, cycled epics, but swimming, my goodness, I'm going to learn something here.
Yeah, amazing. So congratulations, Amy, on being our first swimmer on the podcast.
Thank you. And, you guys are my first non-swimming podcast, so I think we're going to learn our way through this together.
We'll find our lane.
Yeah, exactly.
Find our lane. Good one.
So
could you maybe start by telling us how far is your longest swim to date?
Yeah, so my longest swim I've ever done was in 2023. I did the full length of Lac Léman, Lake Geneva in Switzerland, which is 70 kilometres end to end. I think that's about 43 miles. And that was 28 hours of swimming in one go.
In one go?
Yes,
wow.
Yeah. So there are lots of different types of ultramarathon swimming, as I'm sure there are in running and in cycling. You get stage events where you're hopping out each day. You can have relay events. I primarily do a type of ultramarathon swimming that is called continuous unassisted. So it's all in one go. I'm never touching land. I don't touch the boat. You can't have anything to help you float. No wetsuits, no flotation devices.
I'm assuming that that's considered the purest.
It's a fairly purist route. It's kind of like your no oxygen mountaineering kind of thing. Yeah, I look at it as like wetsuits. Wetsuits are a tool, but I kind of see wetsuits as like the e-bikes of the swimming world.
That's interesting, isn't it? So you don't wear a wetsuit, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
wow.
So swimming costume, hat, one hat, pair of goggles. You're allowed to wear a set of earplugs and a nose clip if you want to, under the rules that I swim under, but I don't like to.
And what temperature could you swim down to for that kind of distance, or some proportion of that kind of distance with no wetsuit?
Kind of depends the distance you're doing. The longest I've done at a cold temperature was a 16-hour swim at about 13 and a half degrees. Lake Geneva, the 70k swim, was about 19 degrees. And that feels really cold overnight, but it's pretty temperate during the day when you've got the sun on your back. And the coldest I would go down to is about 10 degrees. That's the coldest I've trained at.
Yeah, that's cold.
Yeah, that starts to get really... That's a real mental battle at that point.
My mind's going into all sorts of stuff, but Martin, you follow your thread first.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about unassisted swimming, as you call it, because there's a clear boundary between assisted or do you call it assisted? Losing my words. Assisted cycling?
Well,
Supported,
yeah.
Unsupported. That's the word I want.
For sure. I mean, there's a massive... it's funny, we should stop trying to make comparisons, but you're absolutely right. Supported, unsupported, in terms of carrying your own kit.
Supported and unsupported cycling, you can stop, get off your bike,
put your foot
you
down.
can have some food, you can have a coffee, you can get back on your bike for a bit. You can still get off and have some food and do whatever you like, can't you? Or stretch your legs out. But unsupported
What you're saying
swimming,
straight away is this is harder.
I think so. Well, that's where I'm heading. Yeah. So unsupported swimming. If it was supported swimming, that would mean that you could get on the boat and have a little break, but you can't have any breaks for 70 kilometres.
So I think supported and unsupported starts to take a slightly different view in swimming. So on all of my swims, I will always have a safety boat or some kind of support boat or support kayak next to me. So although I can't stop and get on the boat, they will make up hot drinks for me. They will make up my food.
Okay.
So I have the support element. I guess again, if it was a run or if it was a cycle, I've got someone there handing me a bottle when I need it. There are people that do unsupported swims, towing all of their kit with them in a kayak or a rig.
But that starts to feel like sort of Alex Honnold free solo. Like you don't even have a safety rope then.
Yes, yeah.
Which is again interesting. I realised that coming on your first non-swimming podcast, this really is like kindergarten, but I think it's important for our viewers and listeners to set out the ground rules of what you do, because it is such a fascinating world. I'll be interested to know how big that world is. You're a swim coach, you support and train people in this space. I think there's a lot of people in the last decade who have got into sort of cold water swimming, but whether they're dippers or swimmers, whether they're actually just going in for a bit of cold water immersion or they're doing what you do, which is properly swimming, it feels, and maybe this is just me chatting to my sister who absolutely loves that space. I don't like cold water swimming, or social media. It feels like a growing space, but I can't quantify that. It doesn't feel like sort of the cycling world or the running world. But bring us into the world of ultra endurance swimming or open water swimming over the last decade or so. Are you seeing a change?
Yeah, so one of the primary magazine, Open Water Swimming magazine, runs a trends in outdoor swimming study every single year, and it is a massively growing space. Like you said, a lot of that is in dipping, is in cold water swimming, a lot of that community element where people are finding immunity benefits and mental health benefits, community, social. So you get a lot of groups popping up, like the Blue Tits and the men's mental health groups. I couldn't tell you the statistics off the top of my head, but it is double-digit figures of growth year on year on year for about the last 8 to 10 years.
I'm seeing that.
Which I think does also align with what I see outside of swimming as a much bigger growth in endurance sports. I think I'm seeing that in, my partner does a lot of triathlon. You see that in the growth of iron distance and half iron distance triathlons, and more people taking on ultra running. So then when you look within open water swimming and specifically at ultra marathon swimming, it definitely is growing hugely. What I see most closely to me and what I have the most kind of contact with is, of course, the English Channel. We kind of call that the Everest of open water swimming, the Everest of ultramarathon swimming. 5 or 6 years ago, you could book a slot for the English Channel pretty much for the same year, for the next year. If you were to book now in January, you're booking a slot for 2028. There's a 2 to 3 year wait list, which is driven by increased demand. It's driven by the fact that there's a limited number of pilots who can do that. But even with that growth, I mean, the number of people who have swum the English Channel solo is still only at about 2,300 people. And I think we've just ticked over 8,000 and something Everest soloists. So definitely growing, but definitely a very niche community. Very growing but contained at the moment.
That's a waiting list that I'm not going to join.
Yeah, if I had to choose...
I mean, never say never. We might get you in one day. Average age of an English Channel soloist is like late 40s, early 50s.
Well, that's a topic that would be interesting to get to, because, you know, the whole premise of endurance, well, certainly the book that I wrote with Laura Penhall, young, old, male, female, we can all go further. Now, I was writing that in the context of cycling, but you're seeing so many ultra runners and ultra swimmers, you know, through their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, absolutely smashing it. You know, we were out and doing the epic and the recording for the Endurance podcast series with Rob Wainwright recently.
Oh, yeah.
And absolutely phenomenal endurance athlete into his 60s now.
Yeah.
It's inspiring to see. And swimming, well, I'm interested to know what are the component parts of a good endurance swimmer, because it's not going to be the same for, you know, something that would allow a swimmer necessarily to be a competitive swimmer. I mean, swimming is one of those sports like gymnastics that you assume you need to be very competitive at very young.
Yeah, I think that is very much driven by a knowledge of pool swimming. When you start to get into ultra endurance and into marathon swimming, you're not doing it at speed. Of course, you can't do any endurance sport at the speed you did when you're 23, 24 and have all the energy in the world. You're working in zone 2, you're going a lot slower. The real component elements, I mean, if we're going to talk in terms of physiology, it's a higher body fat, really, for increased thermoregulation, unless you're going to wear a wetsuit. You don't need the fast twitch muscles. There's a lot less, there's no impact on your joints, and because you're horizontal, there's a lot less pressure on your pulmonary system to get blood around you. So it's a much lower intensity sport and I think that's where it then offers the ability for a lot more people to get into it. Yeah.
And I did, so no comparison, but I did a half Ironman last year, my first one. I'd like to do a full Ironman some point in the future. It won't be this year because of the big ride I'm training up for. And swimming was my worst, definitely my worst discipline. So I put quite a lot of effort into trying to improve my stroke. I think I did improve it quite a lot, but only from a book. So how does it feel in your body when you're doing these ultra endurance swims? Do you get tired, or is your stroke so good and perfected that really you're just like you're gliding through the water, because that's the objective, isn't it?
You go in and out of that flow state that lets you feel glide. I mean, swimming is so incredibly technique driven. You've obviously found that in your triathlon. It's very heavily, one little change in your stroke can dramatically change the drag and the force working against you. Which I guess is then another component of what makes a good marathon swimmer is you don't necessarily have to be the strongest, the fittest, but you need to be working on your technique. So in terms of when I'm out in the water, when I'm on a long swim, I mean, a lot of what I focus on to keep myself entertained, to keep myself busy in the water is my technique. That is really what helps me to get into a flow state, is I can kind of just tick along going right arm, left arm, breathe, right arm, left arm, breathe. And it does get tiring. You know, when you're doing something for 10, 15, 20 hours, you do feel muscular fatigue. You feel it in your shoulders, you feel it in your triceps. I feel it a lot in my forearms. My grip strength goes first of all, really.
Do you call it grip strength because you're gripping the water?
I call it grip strength because that's how I have to work to strengthen it, to improve that. But what you're doing in the water is holding a tautness so that rather than just your hand being the paddle, that entire section of your hand and your forearm is your paddle. So it's the pressure of tensing your hand like that. So I call it grip strength because that's how I strengthen alternate, yeah. But yeah, all of that starts to go. My hands go, my forearms. I find it in my back a lot, and my hamstrings. I'll kind of curl up into a ball in the water to try and stretch that out. So yeah, it does hurt, but it's...
And mentally, because it's one thing physically doing something repetitive, 28 hours. I want to go back to that event. But mentally, so the North Coast 500 record when I did that was 28 hours, 34 minutes. So I was off the bike for 16 minutes during that time, and I had to sit on a number, and that number was 270 watts normalized power. So normalized power means that if you're freewheeling down the hill, that's negated. But apart from that, you're just sitting on an average. I found the mental side of 28 hours, 34 minutes, just staying in that zone. And I remember like the honeymoon period, by that I mean the first sort of couple of hours, when you're fresh and you're jumping out your skin, was fine. And then by the time I was 6 hours in, 7 hours in, 8 hours in, my first big mental dip was like 6, 7, 8 hours starts to feel like a long ride. I'm already sore. I've already been concentrating for a long time. The idea of doing exactly this at this intensity a day from now, and you can always ride the road in front of you, but once that sort of excitement of the start had passed, and I was sort of 6, 7, 8 hours in, I remember having my first big, it wasn't a crisis of confidence, but it was the first big like, oh my goodness, can I do this? Because of the realization of what lay ahead. You don't have the world changing around you. You don't have that sort of earning the miles the way you do on a bike. So 28 hours swimming. I'm struggling to find a reference point for that, but maybe help the audience give the mental side of that.
So when I'm training for these long swims, a huge element of how I structure my training is mental preparation, and is doing things in training that will give me the mental confidence and the mental tools to get through something like that. So I had expected Geneva to be about a 30-hour swim. I went a little bit faster than expected. So as one of my main training weekends, I did 2 back-to-back 10-hour swims. I did a 10-hour on Saturday, a 10-hour on Sunday. So that when I got into Geneva, I knew that all I had to do was one 10-hour swim and then another, and I've already done that. So then I've just got to do one more 10-hour swim, and I'm done. So my honeymoon period...
Oh, you're right. It's easy. Yeah. That sounds right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's all right.
No, she's put it that way.
Right?
I'm going to go and nail it.
Smash it.
So my honeymoon period was kind of that first 10 hours. You can do the 10 hours, and the first 10 is gorgeous. And things don't change around you as fast as they do, I imagine, when you're cycling or running. But the scenery around you is incredible. It's utterly beautiful. And I've got the boat next to me. I can see my crew milling around on there. I can watch what they're doing. That feels like an element of human contact. I kind of keep in touch with what they're doing on the boat. For me, I would say my first dip, my first big dip, because I had a real like grump at about 4 or 5 hours when we had a headwind against us for about an hour and a half, and my pilot hadn't told me that there was going to be a headwind. It wasn't on the weather forecast. So
Can you feel that when you're swimming?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can because it kicks up waves, it kicks up chops. So every time you put your hand in the water, you're being battered backwards. Every time you breathe, you've got a wave going into your face. So I was absolutely grumping in the water. Like, if it carries on like this, I'm just going to get out. I don't want to... But once we got through the wind, and my mood picked up a little bit. So yeah, my first dip, I think, was probably when we hit about midnight, 1 o'clock. And it must have been at that point about 15 or 16 hours. And I'd started to get really, really cold. You lose the human interaction because you can't see a thing on the boat, and that gets quite tough. I start to ask my crew for like song lyrics to kind of prompt me, and then if they give me the first lyric, then that helps me to remember the song, and I can sing through it in my head. My partner got into the kayak with me and kayaked the entire night so that I had someone there with me. But at the end of the day, it is boring. It is. You kind of just have to let it be boring. That's another element of the endurance. It's not just physical. There's a mental endurance element of it. And kind of to get through that, you talked about, if 6 hours feels like this, I don't know how I'm going to do another 20. And I try to never, ever think like that. You swim to the next feed. I feed every 30 minutes. I'm not doing a 28-hour swim. I'm doing a 30-minute swim. My only job, all I have to do is swim until the next feed, swim until the next time the boat tells me I can have a 30-second rest.
Last question for me on this chain of thought. What was your calorie intake on a 20-hour swim?
I think it was about 20,000. Was that the intake, or was that what I burnt? At that point, we hadn't experimented with higher carbs, so I was taking on 30 grams every 30 minutes, 60 grams an hour.
So that's not very much.
No.
60 grams of carbohydrates an hour. Because cycling 28 hours, I was on 110.
Yeah, and my most recent swim, my Loch Ness, we upped it to about 75, 80. So we are experimenting.
And you would still be in deficit.
Yes, yeah. But then working at the intensities I do, I'm very much down in my zone 2 heart rate on a 5-zone scale.
Would you be burning more calories in colder water like Loch Ness?
Yes, to keep yourself warm, but you're also burning a lot more fat, and I've got a lot more fat.
So hang on, you're burning more fat when it's cold?
You're burning more fat at lower intensities. It's
sure,
not purely
but
carb-driven.
that's more but just being a fat-adapted athlete in the ultra-endurance space. Because obviously if you're just fueling off carbs, then the body naturally grabs the easiest fueling source. So yeah. I'm guessing you train yourself to be more fat-adapted, as I do with ultra-endurance riding. So your nutrition is giving you that slower release anyway.
I think where I am, and having talked with kind of the nutritionists I'm working with at the moment, because it's not purely carbs or purely fat, you're always somewhere on that sliding scale.
Of course.
I don't specifically train so much to be fat adapted. I will always train with carbs. But I think at that level of 75 grams an hour, I'm not purely just taking in carbs. I'll have solids every 2 hours. That's very, very high fat. I'll have protein every hour and a half. So I've got what I'm burning in my body. I'm also taking in a decent amount of fat to keep me going as well.
Oh, makes me cold thinking about it.
And what will you eat? Is it all purely scientifically prepared stuff like carb powders, gels, whatever, or will you eat any actual food? Would you have a Sunday dinner halfway around, for example, fish and chips?
It's a pretty much, it starts to kind of get to a smorgasbord. My go-to is I'll have a carbohydrate drink every half an hour.
Yeah.
Either a pure carb mix or a gel made up with water, hot water, especially if I'm in somewhere like Loch Ness. Every 2 hours, I try to have real food. I have solid food.
Like what, for example?
Like sponge fingers, like the kind you get in the little 2-pack trays.
Oh yeah.
Sponge fingers are good. Bananas, mini Mars bars, beef jerky. I've got very into beef jerky, even though my crew gets really angry because it takes me so long to chew.
And how do you turn onto your back and swim? Like, how do you keep swimming and eat?
I tread water, so I just pause and tread water. They have a bottle kind of very much like a protein shaker that has a line tied to it, and they'll throw it to me on the water. I tread water and have a drink. I come from a water polo background, so the treading water is pretty easy for me, pretty relaxing. And then I can be there for about 20, 30 seconds, leave it on the water, and they reel it back in. And they can, that same way, they can have a little Tupperware on the line. They can send me painkillers if I need. They can send me peach slices. I love peach slices, a bit of peach syrup. That's a real treat. So it's just kind of anything to settle the stomach. We tried like chicken soup, but it just didn't sit well. Wasn't a goer, unfortunately.
The Endurance Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Enjoy Travel. Huge thanks for all that they do. And I don't need to introduce my co-host, but over to Martin Mansell to explain Enjoy Travel.
So Enjoy Travel brings you car hire, hotels, airport parking lounges with a loyalty platform, meaning you buy 9, you get your 10th free. And you can mix and match across any range of our products. You don't need to just buy 10 car hire. You could buy a hotel, a car hire. And we're giving you a special discount code to celebrate our podcast, which is RID3R, as in rider. And you'll get up to 30% off everything.
So click on Enjoy Travel. It's been amazing for these epics. Makes our travel so much more enjoyable and seamless. So thanks, Martin. Thanks, Enjoy Travel.
My furthest swim is 2 kilometres. In the half Ironman I did last year, and I remember this point well, and I felt like I'd been swimming for ages. I felt like I must be 3/4 of the way in, and I'm looking in a car because it went out and like around a bay and back the other side. And I remember looking at my watch thinking, I must be nearly there now, and I'd done about 8 minutes.
Oh no!
And I was thinking, no way, there's something wrong with my watch here. I've definitely done more than that, and I'd only done 8 minutes. So I just can't imagine swimming for that kind of distance. I can't imagine it.
I think the point you make is a good one. When you're doing something where you're out in the water, I can't imagine swimming, but I've done a lot of ocean rowing. And that sense of time gets completely disorientated. You know, rowing the Atlantic, I was going 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 2 hours on for a month. And as soon as you lose sight of shore, that perception of time and the passing of time completely sort of, I can imagine that, you know, there's moments that last a lifetime and then there's hours that pass in a second, and that sort of like linear idea of time completely changes.
It does. It gets really quite disorientating. Even though I feed pretty religiously, it's every 30 minutes. My crew on my boat has a stopwatch, and it's 30 minutes. I will lose count of the feeds after about 3 or 4 hours. So it gets to that point. I have no idea where we are.
Do you swim with your watch on?
No watches.
So you don't know how far you've done. Do you count it in your head sometimes?
I try not to. So first off, no watches. That would come under assisted type of marathon swimming. So you can't have anything that gives you pace information. So no watches. I make my crew on the boat wear a watch because you gotta have it recorded, otherwise does it even count? But I actively try not to count where I am. I quite like that I lose track of the feeds after 3 or 4 hours, because
Really?
Well, I put a lot of pressure on myself. So not so much, you know, when you're doing a channel swim and you're out of sight of land, you can't see anything around you. All you can see is the boat. So it doesn't really matter if you know how long you've been going or if you know how far you are. But doing a lake like Loch Ness or like Geneva, I've looked at the map of it so many times. Yeah. I know that town means we're halfway. I know that town means we're 2/3 away. I know that one means we're in the Petit Lac. And if I count the time that I've been doing, and I know that I'm passing foyers in Loch Ness or the Petit Lac in Geneva, and if I know that I'm not making the time I want to be, I don't know how I would handle that mentally. I don't think I would handle it well, to be honest, knowing myself.
But what if you're not making the time and you don't know about it, and you're halfway and you're a little bit slow, and you're going to be then even slow by that. You might want to start speeding up, but you won't know you need to start speeding up.
I mean, a lot of when I'm doing these swims, I'm pretty much going at the highest pace I think I can sustain for that long.
Right.
What you will, sometimes what you get very much in the channel, and what we had at the end of Loch Ness, is your boat pilot who's captaining the support boat next to you will ask you for what we call a power hour, and that is the fastest pace that you can possibly give for 1 hour at that moment in time. It might be to help you break through a current or get you ahead of a tide so that you can land on the shortest point in the English Channel. It might be to get you ahead of a cargo ship or a container ship, otherwise you might have to stop and wait for it to pass. In Loch Ness, we actually had a lightning storm coming down the Caledonian Canal behind us, and if that had got any closer to us, and obviously for safety they would have had to get me out the water. So I'm until someone asks me for that power hour, I'm swimming at the highest pace I know I can sustain for that long. There's not really any element of, I'm not going to make the goal I wanted to, because kind of...
Does that take concentration? I can well imagine that it would be very easy just to sort of daydream off into a place where you're just going through the motions. So to keep that slightly higher intensity, that sort of threshold power, the maximum you can hold for an hour, that sort of functional capacity is clearly a very different thing to that sort of threshold level where you can... but it's very easy when you're out there for hours and hours and hours to just sort of like lose focus and end up doing less power. So that in itself takes a bit of focus, because it's slightly harder than it's comfortable, isn't it?
And that's where, when we were talking about kind of being in the flow state and getting into that zone, that's where I find that focusing on my technique really helps, because it's that focus on making sure I've got my early catch, making sure I've got my fingers very slightly spread, making sure I'm kicking, powerfully and efficiently. That focus on my technique is what helps me keep at that very slightly higher level. The threshold hours, that gets, especially where I had to turn that on after 10 hours of swimming, that was really, really tough. That was hard.
Really tough, but also it gives you a focus. That's an hour. That's sort of a finite sort of focus.
If it's for an hour, yes. Yeah. Power hour, colloquially, I ended up having to do it for an hour and a half, which, again, a little bit grumpy about. I was like, you can't ask me for a threshold power and then expect me to hold it for 90 minutes, but we make do.
And something we've not talked about, I mean, you talked about the English Channel being the Everest of marathon swimming, but the reality is you've done much more. You're... am I right in saying the first person to do Guernsey to France?
Yes, yeah.
So Guernsey to France, which was further.
Yeah.
Lake Geneva, which was a hell of a lot further.
Yeah, about a double channel, yeah.
A double channel, so like a double channel. I've actually done a single scull row the length of Scotland across so I've rowed the 22 miles, the length of Loch Ness. Is the swim 22 miles?
Is that what 38k is?
Yeah,
that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
So I've rowed that. My memories of rowing single scull from Loch Ness is I set out on the west. Did you go west to east?
I went down towards Fort Augustus.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the wind had spun round.
Spun round because obviously the UK has a prevailing westerly, so most people would go west to east. But on your day, I guess you switched it round. So I set out in a single scull boat, albeit it was quite low in the water, with completely flat, calm conditions. And because it's quite a narrow, long loch, the wind pushes the seas towards the waters towards the other end. So by the time I did the last 5 to 10 miles into Inverness, you were in this short, sharp chop, which was flooding the boat. So, I mean, I was like row, 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 and then like bailing my own boat out, row, 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 bailing my boat out. And it was really interesting on a 22-mile row, going from completely flat sea state to something that was really challenging and threatening to sink me. I can't imagine how difficult that would be in in the water itself, because you're experiencing that in so much, closer proximity, but also if it's getting worse, it's going to continue to get worse. If you're in a loch, a very long, thin loch like that, that the closer you get to the other end, the more that wind and that wave state is going to get sort of concertina together. So that must play mental games as well.
It does, but I think that's the mental endurance element. Is I know that's going to get worse. I know that the weather might pick up or might die down a little bit. And it sounds like I actually had the exact same weather conditions. When I started at about 4 a.m, it was mirror flat. It was absolutely stunning. And then by the time we were at the end, it was force 4 building towards force 5. And yeah, it is hard. It is a really difficult thing because I've got nothing more valuable to add to it other than just like it's difficult. It's really tough. The swim was tough. They were asking me for a power hour at that time, and it was hard, but you just kind of keep putting one arm in front of the other. I know that if I do that, I'm going to get to the end at some point. The weather picking up doesn't make the lock any longer.
Something you said there reminds me of the quote that's on the homepage of your website. I'm just going to read you your words back to you. The challenge can be scary, it can be terrifying, but it's all those limits where you truly learn what your mind and body are capable of. So you're talking about when you're in that space, you're in the learning space. And I promise you that you are capable of it.
Exactly.
No, I mean, that sounds like a good coach speaking to me there, because, it's so easy when you're in that learning space, when you're doing something beyond what you've done before, to sort of back off. But, you'll be you're not necessarily having a barrel of laughs when you're there, but it's the stuff you look back on fondly.
Exactly. And I try to pick, I'm not going to say all, but most of my swims I try to pick to find out something new about myself. I did my first ever stage swim this year, my first kind of 4-day event, and I'd never, can I do that? Can I come back day after day and perform at the level I want to? I picked Loch Ness because I wanted to test myself against the cold. I picked Geneva because I wanted to test myself against the distance and the duration. And I think it's until you're in that difficult point, until the wind is in your face and the chop is here and actually no one told you that the River Oik is going to be running right against you when you're trying to get into the beach. It's until you're tested at that point that you don't really know how you're going to handle that mental resilience. So that's what I love about it.
And how did you feel at the end of Geneva then, your longest one so far? How did you feel when you got to the end?
I always feel this measure of relief when I finish a swim.
Yes.
I would love to say that I get out and that it's all ecstatic happiness, pride, joy. The first emotion is always relief. There's always that little voice in the back of my mind that's never 100% sure I'm going to be able to finish any of these swims until I'm standing above the waterline, arms in the air. And then, aside from the relief, it's pride, and it's just so much. I love doing these swims with my family. My family is always my crew on the boat.
Right.
A lot of people in marathon swimming say you shouldn't do that. They'll have friends or friends or coaches. I love having my family with me there. I love going through that experience.
Which
with
family
them.
members?
My mum has been on every single one of my boats with me. My partner, my very long-suffering partner, Will, has been on almost all of them, and my younger sister, and new for this year, her partner, my brother-in-law. So, little close-knit group, but they keep me going through it.
Was there any points on that or any of the other big swims you've done where you thought you'd need to stop? Any really dark moments where you didn't think you were going to make it?
The darkest I've got to, well, I think two equally bad points. In the English Channel, something went wrong with my nutrition. We don't know if it was a bad batch or if we'd opened it too early and it had gone off, or if I'd eaten something wrong the night before. But I had D and V for about the first 9 hours of my 13-hour swim. And that was, it got to about 6.5 hours, and I'd been throwing up every single thing I tried to take in, and anything I didn't throw out was coming out the other end. And I was probably, I was probably moments away from quitting. Having my mum on the boat, I don't like to just make those decisions, so I told her, like, I can't do this. I'm about to call it. Out of her bag of tricks, she pulled some of my late father's anti-nausea medication from his chemotherapy, and we took an extra long break. And she just, like, if you can keep this down, it's going to make you feel better, and it did. But that was absolutely awful. That is the emptiest I've ever felt. Like,
and amazing for you to have pulled through that. But what an amazing mum, because
yes.
it'd be so easy for a mum at that point to put the mum hat on and just want to wrap her arms around you and protect you. But the fact that she did something in that moment which gave you the option to carry on, that's amazing.
Well, and that's a lot of the reason why people say not to have family members on board, is that it can be really difficult for them to see you suffering like that, and to not say, right, okay, let's get you warm, let's get you out. You know, she's seen me nearly hypothermic. My Guernsey to France swim 13.5 degrees. When it hit night at that point, every time I stopped to feed, I would instantly start full body shivering. So, you know, she's seen me really, really bad, but she believes in me so much that she is just there to help, to support, to enable, to get me through it. The crew is the most important. I couldn't do it without my crew. They're the most important part of any of my swims. Yeah. It's a team sport, I would say. It really, like, you know, it's a physical element of it. When Will kayaked the entire night in Geneva. He did 14 hours in an inflatable kayak with a puncher.
With puncture?
Yeah. Yeah. My sister did a couple of hours of kayaking, like a couple of months after a rotator cuff surgery. I don't think I could do these swims without them there with me. Even though you're face down in the water, the human connection you get from being able to breathe and seeing them on the boat there with you, it's a real boost. It's huge.
What do you make of the film that came out last year, Young Women in the Sea? I only ask that in the context of, it's the first time I can remember seeing an English Channel swim sort of on the big screen. I shared it with my daughters, and it was as much about sort of a moment in time and the historical context of women in swimming and open water swimming in the English Channel. I've got no knowledge of how factually correct it was, but it certainly was a talking point in our household.
Yeah, it was actually a really impressively accurate film. I loved it. They had all of the way they were setting up with her being unable to touch the boat. No one could touch her. That would mean disqualification. Her rules about entering the water, exiting the water, everything she was wearing was really, really accurate. It was really impressive. And we're actually it will be the 100th or 150th anniversary of Trudy Airedale's swim this year. I've actually got one of my coached athletes has their English Channel window over the same week as hers over the anniversary.
How cool is that?
That's a really, it's a big year. It's a really big year.
Very, very inspiring. I enjoyed the film. So did my girls. Before we round things off, I'm really keen to hear something about your coaching. So this is not just about you breaking your own sort of boundaries and setting these amazing ultra endurance marathon swims, but you're now empowering a whole community. We actually first met at an event I was speaking at in London for 10 Iron Women. 10 Iron Women was a women's Ironman network which has grown and grown and grown. It was a pretty interesting evening, and you're now building this community of people interested in marathon swimming. How do you go from doing it yourself to then coaching others? Because that's not a jump that a lot of people can make. I remember when I was learning to be a ski instructor, half the course failed, not because they were bad at skiing, but because they didn't know what they did well enough to teach others. So just because you're good at something doesn't mean you can teach it.
Yeah. So although I haven't been doing competitive swimming or open water swimming my whole life, I have been swimming my whole life. And when I was younger, I did a lot of water polo coaching. I did all of my coaching qualifications. I did coaching and refereeing to quite a high level there, and I loved it. So I had a lot of the skills there for coaching, for leading people through kind of a fitness journey towards a goal. And it's starting to put puzzle pieces together around that. So I've got the coaching background. I self-coach. I write all of my own training plans. I train myself for all of these events. I love speaking to other people about what works for them. Everyone trains differently. And so I kind of just really put those two things together and started coaching other people towards these swims. And I think it's the quote that you read off my website. That's what I love about it, is I don't take on many one-to-one coached athletes because I do it alongside my day job, my actual job, unfortunately. But a couple of my coached athletes have been with me for 3 or 4 years now, and they've gone from doing their first 1 mile or 2 mile or 3K open water swim towards now one of them's doing a 15K swim this year. One of them's about to do a 40K. And it's like being able to help people through that journey of when they first come and they say, oh, I've signed up to 2K and I don't know if I can do it, to now like, yeah, let's pick a 40K. We're going to get you in a lock. You're going to love it. I just love that. I love helping people realize what they're capable of, because everyone, with endurance, I think it's really just finding the sport that you love. You can endure in any sport, in any discipline. For people who love swimming, I love helping them find that love.
I can see that passion. I can absolutely see that passion. Last question from me, and maybe you've covered it, and then maybe Martin for some final thoughts. If somebody's listening to this and they've come to this podcast because they're interested in endurance cycling, but you've sparked an interest in marathon swimming, where should they go next?
Oh, for an interest in marathon swimming specifically, I would start to look at
or open water endurance swimming.
Open water swimming. There are a lot of open water locations around the UK that will do, if not necessarily coach sessions, but open to the public sessions. I would say go along to those. Go along to your local lake or find a community at your local seaside. Blue Tits or the men's mental health groups are a really good place to start. There'll be lots of people who do longer distance swimming in those. And I would say, honestly, it's starting to do events. Start to sign up to a couple of the shorter events. In the UK, we've got some gorgeous mass participation events in London, in Wales, Scotland, the Lake District, and start to see if you enjoy it. Sign up for a 2K, sign up for a 3K, give it a go, see if you like it. Yeah.
I was going to say I might just, but yeah.
Maybe that has to be the next podcast. Maybe we'll get you two out for an open water swim.
Swimming
get you out
epic.
for a dip.
A swimming epic.
Yeah, how about that? Somewhere warm.
The trouble with this podcast is we get so enthusiastic about lots of things that I don't know when we're going to fit them all in. My biggest ever swim was Arran to Butte.
Oh yeah.
Which was a huge challenge. 8 miles, 4.5 hours. Yeah, genuinely one of the hardest things I've ever done physically.
Last question from me then is a double question. So your furthest to date 70 km swim, but we were talking before the podcast started, you were starting to go out on the bike, or you were thinking about it, or you've done it a little bit. So the double question is, part A, are you going to swim further than 70 km, or is that it? And part B, are you going to expand into anything else like cycling, triathlon, running, anything else like that?
Part A, I would like to try and go further
100K.
one day. Maybe 100. There's only a tiny handful of people who've ever gone over 100. I would love to join that ranks. My partner and I alternate a big year and a little year. So I do a big swim one year and he does fewer events, and then I do a little swim the next year and support his events. So this is a little year. Next year, I'm not quite sure, but it might be in the future. A longer swim might be in the future. Would I branch out into other sports? I really want to try and get back into it. I used to do a bit of running. I'd love to give a triathlon a go.
Oh yeah.
Not quite a short story, but when I was training for Geneva 2023, I was doing a lot of my training in lockdown, in COVID. I was working from home, so I wasn't really walking anywhere. I was just driving to the pool, doing a lot of swimming, and then driving home. So I specialised a little bit too much, and my Achilles tendons shortened, and I have no muscles in my legs anymore. So I've actually been working with a PT to try and build that back up again, to be strong enough to start running. I have finally graduated last week. My legs are strong enough. He will now allow me to start doing jumps. We're going to start doing plyos from next week. So catch me at your local marathon in maybe a couple of years' time.
Like, talk about specialisation. This is insane. I mean, like, so you're saying that you swam so much that you'd sort of gone like half mermaid. Like, you actually need to come back to learn to run.
I swam so much that I couldn't put my heels on the floor walking up any kind of incline, and I even now I get really bad cramp in my calves walking too much. I just don't have like
and when I would open water swim, because you're doing that really sort of slow legs, but you're slightly dragging your feet, you're going to tell me all the things I'm doing wrong now. I'm not used to my feet being sort of in that position, so then after like an hour of swimming I start to get cramps in my calves. So you're so used to that, and you've got that sort of flexibility that you can't do the opposite.
I'm the complete opposite, yeah.
That is hilarious.
So I've got an element of hypermobility.
You're a
so
mermaid.
my legs are actually, my ankles flex really, really easily the opposite way that they should do for land sports. So yeah, I specialise a bit too much. It has been a long, long process of building up to bodyweight squats and bodyweight lunges, but we're nearly there. We are nearly there.
Amazing. We could chat all day. Honestly, I was saying to Martin beforehand, I do not know what we're going to chat about in this podcast, because I know nothing about ultra-endurance swimming, marathon swimming. This has been fascinating. Absolutely love the conversation, Amy. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'd love to follow you and see what you get up to next. How do people follow your own swims and your coaching?
So people can find me predominantly on Instagram as Amy Swims. Nice and easy.
Amy Swims.
That's all I do. That's how to find me.
I'll be sure to follow you straight after this.
Superb. Thank you so much. Love that conversation. Hope you did as well, and we'd love to have you back to hear some of the other expeditions. I think this has got us into the swimming world, Martin.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm honoured to have been your first swimming guest. So I hope that helped.
Oh, it was superb. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that episode of the Endurance podcast. Endurance really is a mindset as much as it is the physical training, and I think we're learning as we get more and more guests on endurance, that the commonalities, the things that connects these things are really across the piece, whether you're climbing a mountain, cycling around the planet, or taking on these unbelievable swimming exploits. And I'm sure there'll be lots more adventures to come. Martin, any final thoughts?
I think final thought is just, if you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did, you know what's coming. Like, share, put some comments, press subscribe.
Thanks, everyone.